Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. It wasn't all that long ago that pretty much everybody believed in God. They didn't necessarily believe in the same deity, but they believed in some deity. This was such an accepted truth that hardly anybody questioned it. Even the intellectuals of the day were believers, incorporating whatever brilliant insights they had gained into their old religious beliefs. As recently as 400 years ago, this would have been the situation almost everywhere. The most anybody would have drifted from the beliefs of over 1,000 years before was in the form of a deistic type of belief. This meant that God had, of course, created the world and had given it its mechanism for continuance, but essentially handed over the day-to-day workings of the world to something called nature. This was a fairly radical belief in the 17th century, and it represented the extreme edge of rebellion against biblical belief. But with the scientific revolution, all that came crashing down. In the span of a couple hundred years, scientific explanations for just about everything usurped the religious explanations, and before we knew it, atheism was belief of those in the know. This essentially is the way things are today. Belief in God is still enormously popular, but it is something that looks primarily to the past for its support. The future, as far as the latest trends are showing, is with the atheists. This is obviously quite a blow for those who genuinely wish to maintain their firm belief in God and have that belief be a guiding light for their entire life. For Jews in particular, the so-called days of awe, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, represent the primary time of the year in which one's focus is supposed to be more on God than at all other times. What is a Jew who really wants to believe supposed to do against this relentless onset of disbelief? This is not a particularly new question. It has been around seemingly forever, but it needs an answer that speaks to our times. This week's Parsha is called Vayelech, which means, and he went. It is the shortest Parsha in the Torah, and for that reason is frequently combined with last week's Parsha, which is also quite short. The two Parshas combine very nicely as they both revolve around the same theme: rejection of God and its consequences, and finding the way back to God. In the case of this week's Parsha, it is simply Moshe telling everyone to remain strong and stay with the program. In the middle of that pep talk, there is a brief threat about what will happen when they inevitably stray from the path. The end of this Parsha seems to come right after the beginning. It is really a lead up to the next Parsha, which is one long poem dealing with Israelite destiny. The connection between the two Parshas is that the second serves as a poetic reminder for what will happen if they stumble in the pitfalls of the first. It is not an altogether encouraging picture, as there is quite a bit of warning and threat, to say nothing of an overbearing sense of fate that this will all happen whether they like it or not. This is the general theme of the final third of the book of Deuteronomy: warning and destiny, with a vague idea of a light coming at the end of the tunnel. But right smack in the middle of all this is a strange phrase that appears a couple of times that seems to throw the whole God runs the show belief out the window. The quote that contains this odd phrase is fairly long, since we have to understand the context in which the phrase appears. Quote, God said to Moshe, "You shall sleep with your ancestors, and this nation will rise up and stray after other foreign gods of the land to which they shall come, and they will abandon me and deny my covenant that I made with them. And my anger shall come on that day, and I will abandon them, and I shall hide my presence from them, and they shall be consumed. Great evils shall find them, and they will say on that day, is it not because my God is no longer with me that these evils have found me? And I will surely hide my presence on that day because of the evil that they did, for they turned to other gods. And now write for yourselves this poem and teach it to the Israelites. Place it in their mouths so that the poem will be a testament for all of Israel." So what exactly is the strange phrase? It is that short and easily missed line about, "I shall hide my presence from them." In Hebrew, it is only a few words and hardly gets noticed in the course of the whole speech. But there is no question that this short phrase has generated an enormous amount of interest over the centuries from Jewish scholars across the spectrum. What is the meaning of "I will hide my presence"? How exactly does God do this? The Torah is altogether unclear on what precisely happens when God's presence is hidden. One gets the impression of something like a solar eclipse going on that forces all involved into some sort of panic. But there's no indication that something as natural as an eclipse is at work here. Perhaps to understand what it means for God's presence to be hidden, we have to understand the opposite, God's presence being present. If anything, this state of affairs is more unusual for us than the hidden state. We are used to not really sensing any sort of presence of God in our lives. For most people, the most they can hope for is maybe a once-in-a-lifetime experience in which they truly sense some sort of supernatural presence that cannot really be explained or defined. These are among the most wonderful and memorable experiences of life, but they are vanishingly rare. It is probably true that the average person today, even if they are otherwise a believer, would say that God's presence being hidden is the norm and not the exception. But for biblical standards, this was considered a severe aberration from the norm, even so that it was mentioned here as a particularly harsh form of punishment. But how could that be? If it is so normal for us, how could it have been so abnormal for them? Were divine miracles so common back then that going a day or a week or a year without one was considered a spiritually empty time? This seems difficult to believe, even by biblical standards. So what was the magic formula that enabled the norm to be God's presence being very apparent and hiding that presence being considered a punishment worthy of the Bible? Perhaps the answer to this question lies not in some radical difference in the way things happened in nature, but in the way natural things were looked upon. Rain was rain in biblical times, the same as it is now. So was life and death and hunger and thirst, to say nothing of a beautiful sunset or a night sky filled with stars. They saw what we see, and they got just as wet from the rain as we do. The difference lies in how we understand those experiences. If a person saw the rainfall as the natural occurrence that we know it to be, then it would be exactly that, a natural occurrence. There is not necessarily anything wrong with seeing things in this way. On the contrary, that is the way they are. However, there is another way of seeing something as natural as the rain. It could be seen as a manifestation of the divine hand of God working through this power that we call nature. Rain, if seen through this lens, would not merely be clouds and atmospheric conditions and getting soaked. It would be a divine source of nourishment for the parched earth, of crops blooming and food on the table. It would be something to pray for and something to give thanks for upon receiving. It wouldn't necessarily be a miracle on the scale of the splitting of the sea, but it sure would be something worth noticing when it happens. The presence of God was no more present in biblical times than it is now. Rain was just rain. But the presence of God within the rain was as obvious as the grass growing. With all this in mind, perhaps we can now understand what was so harsh about the presence of God being hidden. It didn't mean that there was less rain or that anything natural changed in any way. What was different was all in the way the human mind perceived things. This divine punishment of God's presence being hidden was nothing more and nothing less than people no longer being able to sense God's presence in things that they were able to in the past. When one is actually able to sense the presence of God in all things natural, having this channel shut off is about as traumatic a thing as possible. It is akin to a spiritual form of blindness. What was visible and obvious simply is no longer so. This is about as biblical as things get. To be able to see God's presence in something as wet and as natural as rain is like living in the midst of a Bible story. To not be able to do this, even if one really wants to, is to be subject to a spiritual form of hell, depending on one's perspective. This is what those verses are referring to. When we abandon God, God activates a switch of sorts in the mind that clouds our ability to see God even when we want to. It's about as karma-like a punishment as there is in the Bible. If we give up on God, God's presence is no longer accessible to us. We, in a sense, call all the shots here. There are no miracles at work, just different states of awareness. So when we look at the state of affairs today, where atheism is on the ascendance and theism of any sort is on the ropes, we have to realize that this is all a consequence of our state of mind. When we don't want to detect the presence of God in the world, we won't. It is a kind of divine censorship, similar to what is becoming increasingly more apparent on the internet. Things simply cannot be seen in the way they once were. We have nobody to blame for this state of affairs than ourselves. It is apparently the way we want things to be. But there is a remedy for all this. It requires nothing more than changing one's awareness of things. It may not be as easy as it was in biblical times, but that doesn't make it impossible. It will take a bit more willpower to go against the trend. But what genuine spiritual seeker doesn't want a good challenge to get there? This is the supreme spiritual challenge of our times, to try to pierce that veil and find that hidden presence of God in all things. There is no greater goal than this, and success is right in the middle of our minds. Shabbat Shalom.